And for more on the conflict in Gaza, we're joined by Edward Djerejian. He's a former U.S. ambassador to Syria and Israel. He joins us now from Houston, Texas. Thank you so much for joining us, Ambassador.
My pleasure to be with you.
You know, Israel's ground offensive appears to be growing. Do you think this will have the same outcome as it did in 2012 and 2008? How much longer do you think this will go on?
Well, it's difficult to predict how long it will go on, but obviously the goal of the Israelis is the same as it was in 2008, 2012, which is basically to really diminish Hamas's military infrastructure and especially its rocket capabilities. That's why they decided to go in on the ground to get to these tunnels, which the focus of the military action is, because the Israeli Air Force did extensive damage, but obviously not enough to diminish the capability of Hamas and other groups like PIJ, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, to launch rockets from Gaza into Israel. So I think the military focus will be on this military infrastructure, and it just depends on how much they can destroy and what assessment they make, that if they destroyed enough, that there may be a future period of calm for a year or two.
You have said in the past that this would have been a last resort decision for Israel to move forward with this ground incursion. Do you still feel the same way? And what do you make of this death toll that continues to rise with civilians involved?
Well, it's a humanitarian disaster. It's a real tragedy. As you know, Gaza is a prison. You have 1.7 million Palestinians living there. The conditions of life are very rudimentary, to say the least, and very difficult. And they're exacerbated by these military clashes and the conflict situation. That's why Hamas needs to have a ceasefire agreement that will, as they're demanding, lift the blockade, the Israeli blockade of Gaza, to allow goods and services to come in so that the people can have some semblance of what can be called a normal life, and that the border crossings with Egypt at Rafah also be opened. Now, Hamas also has some political conditions in terms of the release of political prisoners, but they really need to get an agreement in any ceasefire arrangement that the blockade will be lifted. And there are no signs of ceasefire discussions going on now.
That's right. Hamas doesn't seem any closer to making any kind of moves or concessions. So who do you think can bring them to the table at this point?
Well, I think the Egyptians play the primary role because of their geographic contiguity. Egypt is a very important Arab country with a strong military capability, and it has traditionally brokered agreements between Hamas and Israel. So I think Egypt plays a very major role. That's where I think the negotiations, any ceasefire negotiations, will probably be centered.
All right, Edward Djerejian, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us from Houston.